Hi friends, it's Jim Alfredson and I'm here with the brand new Hammond SK Pro. Yes, it's finally here, and yes, I can finally talk about it. This is a complex instrument, but it has been designed for ease of use. There's a lot to cover. Let's dig right in. The Hammond SK Pro is the latest evolution of Hammond's SK line. The SK stands for Stage Keyboard, and this is meant to be your bread and butter bass of your keyboard rig. And of course it has Hammond's illustrious organ sound built in. And yes, this is the engine from the XK5, the new MTW engine. But no, it does not have the multi-contact sensors underneath the keys. This keybed is the same as the other SK keyboards. They have emulated the multi-contact system, I think via velocity or some other parameter. So it is in there, but it's not a true multi-contact system in terms of having physical contacts under the keys. So before we get too deep into this thing, it is a beast. It has a lot of power under the hood, but Hammond has made it very easy to use. We of course have this beautiful color screen in the middle. It is not a touch screen, but it is very easy to navigate and easy to see where you are and what you need to do. So maybe we can start with the outputs and inputs on this because it has a lot of flexibility. Starting over here on my left, we have an 11-pin output for use with Leslie speakers. We have a dedicated headphone output. We have a stereo line output, which can also be used in mono. We have a rotary output, which is an output that can go to, say, an external sim or another amp and just has the organ part on it. And that way you could use your stereo line outs for your other non-organ sounds. Right next to that, we have a pedal out for the organ. So that gives you a nice solid bass signal that you can put into, say, another bass amp or augment in whatever way you'd like. And then we have our individual outs, and those are assignable. So we can assign any of the extra voices to those outputs. We have an input, which is useful for your laptop or your music player. So you can do backing tracks or run your external sounds from your laptop into the SK Pro and then just have one set of outputs going to the front of house. We've got two assignable foot switch inputs, an expression pedal input, and a dedicated damper input. Next to that, we have MIDI in and out on standard 5-pin DINs, and then we have our USB connectivity. I'd like to direct your attention over to my right. This is a self-actuating power switch that can actually turn the unit off by itself after a preset amount of time. This is also on the XK5 and the SKX, I believe. But the biggest thing for me is right next to it, we have an IEC connector. No more wall wart, no more brick, no more specialized power cable to lose, to misplace, to show up to the gig and you're like, where did my power cable go? I've done it. Don't have to worry about that anymore. We have an IEC input for standard power connection. Thank you, Hammond. So that basically covers the hardware in and out. Now let's go over the front panel. Over on this side, we have pitch bend and mod wheels. Yes, yes, yes. The XK3 and the XK3C had these, as well as the XK1, not the 1C, but the 1. They were missing on the XK5. I do miss them actually on that, but they're back here on the SK Pro. So awesome. I'm really happy about that. We have a portamento switch, a bypass switch for the Leslie, and our Leslie controls stop and fast, turn stop off, and we get our slow Leslie. Up here we have our master volume, and then we have our pedal to lower switch, our split switch, control user, and our transpose buttons down here. This section controls the organ. We've got our drawbar select buttons, our chorus vibrato buttons, and this 3-part organ button. With this button, you can press that and instantly it splits the keyboard into lower manual, upper manual, and then pedals coming in via MIDI. Then of course we have our 9 drawbars, which are labeled with the foot rankings that they apply to. And up here we have our different labels for the different types of organs, because we have Hammond organs in here. We have Farfisa, Vox, and Acetone, which is pretty cool. That's a new one. And of course, we have pipe organ emulation as well. Next to that, we have our piano section, which has its own dedicated volume control. I should mention the organ has its own dedicated volume control as well, which is independent of the master volume control. But back to the piano section, we have our acoustic and electric pianos in here, and category buttons are nicely labeled. So acoustic piano, electric piano, harpsichord, clavinet, chromatic percussion, and then other, which is kind of a catch-all. And here we have some guitars mostly. Again, dedicated volume control for that section. We have our ensemble section, which has our wind instruments, our strings, our choirs, synth pads, bass, and other synthesizer sounds. Again, dedicated volume knob for that as well. And we have these edit buttons so we can edit those sounds. In the middle, we have our nice color screen. Again, not a touch screen, but very readable, very accessible, allows us to understand what's going on. We have our favorites right here, and then we have these pedal assign buttons, so we can assign different sections to the pedals or to the lower manual. And these white buttons right in the middle, everybody has been asking about these when they saw the teasers. These are the allocate buttons, and these allow us to turn on and off the different sections of the instrument. So right here we have our organ. Right now it's off, so we got no sound, but if I just hit the button, I've got organ. If I hit the piano button, then we get our acoustic pianos. Turn a little reverb on there. Ensemble, we get our synth pads and strings and stuff. Very nice. And then synth, we get our monosynth section, which we haven't talked about yet. That's over here on my right. We'll get there in just a second. So these allocate buttons are very handy if you want two voices, two different sounds at once. You just press two buttons at once. So I can have organ and piano. Turn off our percussion, maybe. Right. If I want piano and strings or piano and a pad, which is what I have now, I'll put it on strings. Why not? And again, we have volume, so we can balance the piano and the strings together. Maybe we want piano and synth. Right? We can do that. We can have all four on if we'd like. Just like that. Pretty fun. And then again, if we want to assign any of these allocations to the lower manual or the pedals, we just hold the button and assign it, and there it is. Very easy to use. Moving on, we have our navigation controls for going through the menu system, our record button for recording our patches, and here's our percussion for the organ. Now the organ section's over on the left-hand side, my left-hand side, but if you know a vintage console like a B3, the percussion is always on the right. And so the percussion is on the right here, and that gives us the ability to play the organ and turn the percussion on and off with our right hand while we're keeping bass going on our left or the pedals. I find that very convenient. It would be kind of weird if it was over here. It would be an adjustment for a traditional player like myself, so I appreciate this forethought. And then finally, we have the monosynth section. This is something that caused quite a stir when the first teaser video came out, because this is kind of all you could see in the video, and people were like, what is Hammond doing, releasing a synthesizer? Kind of. This is a monophonic synthesizer. It sounds really great. It's got a great filter. It's got a bunch of different waveforms here that you can choose from. You can choose the octave, again, its own volume control, so you can mix it in how you want. And these sliders control the envelope generators for the filters and the amplifier and all that. It's a great sounding little synth. It's got a great sounding filter. Get some overdrive on the filter right there. Sounds really cool. So it's very flexible. You can use it for lead, you can use it for bass. It works great in both circumstances. If you want a polyphonic synth sound, those are located in ensemble, under the ensemble categories here under other. So that's kind of our general layout. It's a lot of buttons, but it actually makes sense if you think about it in terms of the different sections. So in terms of the hierarchy of the sound, we have what Hammond is calling combinations. And I like to think of them as multis in the Kurzweil world or performances in the Yamaha world. So they are a collection of all 4 individual patches saved as one preset. So your combination preset would have your organ sound, your piano sound, your ensemble sound, and your synth sound all saved as one preset. There's 100 user spaces to save your own combinations. And then every patch, every individual preset, like your individual organ sounds and your pianos, those have, I think, 100 spaces as well to save. One thing I forgot to mention is the reverb. We have reverb and master EQ over here. The reverb is individual for each allocation. In other words, you can set the send of each allocation to be different, so it's not the same across the board. So your synths can have a different amount of reverb on it than your piano. And what's even cooler is that the organ section reverb can actually be a different type of reverb with its own send than the other 3. So you can have 2 different types of reverb going, one for organ and another for the piano, ensemble, and synth sections. And so that way your B3 reverb or your organ reverb can be either going through the Leslie to get that nice spin effect, or it can be going after the Leslie to be like more of a studio recording, but it can be a different type of reverb. What I've done is set up a spring reverb for the organ, like a classic spring reverb, and then set up a hall or a church style reverb for my other sounds. It's really flexible and really cool. So let's dig into some of the sounds real quick. I'm not going to go hugely in depth here. There's so much to cover. We'll have to make a bunch of videos to actually deep dive into this thing and learn how to program it. But for now, let's just listen to what it sounds like. So I'm going to start with the organ, which you pretty much already heard. So if we press our 3-part organ button here, we've now got the organ spread across the keyboard correctly. We've got lower manual down here for bass. Turn this up a little bit. Yeah. And then we got our upper manual here. And if I had pedals connected via MIDI, they'd have their own pedal registration down there. That sounds very good. If we go into our piano category, again, we just press our allocate button to go into pianos, press our category button if we're not already there. And the SK Pro has 2 new piano samples in it. It has a beautiful Japanese style grand piano. And then it has a American style piano, or maybe a German style, I'm not quite sure which, if you know what I'm talking about. Of course, in our electric pianos, we've got the Rhodes. And all of these sounds are very, very tweakable. I just want to show you real quick a couple that I've tweaked. And like, here's my version of the Rhodes. You just heard the stock one. Here's mine, and it took me maybe 5 minutes to do this. Let's go to the phase. Right. Maybe in the next video we'll get into how to edit these, because that's going to require, I think, a video of its own. But that's my version of the Rhodes. We have a Wurlitzer in here. Sounds great. The clavs can be straight, or they can have a touch wah on them, or we can use the expression pedal for a while, which I kind of like. And that kind of sounds like this. Then we have our chromatic percussion. We got like music boxes and mallets of all kinds. Some handbells. In the other category, we basically have things like accordions. And when you press these category buttons more than once, like I'm just pressing the other several times, you cycle through all the categories that are available, and there's a bunch of different categories available. And you can also see them down at the bottom here on the screen. You can scroll through them with the page buttons. And this brings up an interesting point to me. I'll take a break here for a second and explain this. Yes, we have these category buttons. Yes, we have two different parts that are labeled piano and ensemble, but you can put the piano anywhere you want in terms of these two buttons here. Like we could have an acoustic piano on piano and say that we wanted an electric piano on the ensemble part. So the way to get there is just to basically click on any of the categories under the ensemble section and just use our page buttons here to scroll through the different categories. And we can just scroll through until we find the acoustic pianos and the electric pianos. And there's the electric pianos right there. There's my electric piano, and here's the regular piano. And we can put them together. And we can split it so the electric piano is on the bottom. We just hit our split key. Right, we can move up the octaves and all that. We can transpose it however we want. So just because these are labeled in different categories does not mean you can't have strings in one category, and vice versa. We can allocate them to these buttons any way we want. All right, so we've got our strings and stuff in the ensemble part. These are really nice. Just go to the strings here. And again, we can edit these sounds any way we want. Basses, choirs, this is all standard stuff. A lot of it comes over from the SKX, but a lot of the samples have been improved as well. And then finally, I think the last thing I want to talk about in this video before it gets too long is the monosynth section. So we press our allocate button, we get into our monosynth section. So let's put our cool synth bass that we just made. Put that on the bottom. We'll put our electric piano on the top here, and we can do fun stuff like this. So that's the SK Pro in a nutshell. I think I'll end the video there. You kind of get an overview of what it's doing. For the next series of videos, I will deep dive into each individual allocation section and how we can edit these voices to be more like we want. There's extensive editing capabilities in here. And in fact, one thing that I discovered is that you can actually layer sounds within these allocations in a different way. I'll touch on that in the next video. So for example, what I'm talking about is if I want piano and strings, but I also want another sound on the ensemble, I can get piano and strings just on the piano part and then use the ensemble to layer something else or split something somewhere on the keyboard. It's very powerful, and we'll dig into that next time. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, please give me the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and I hope you enjoy the quality of this video. I've tried to up my YouTube game in 2021. We got to make everything better this year because last year was so bad. I hope you're all staying safe, staying happy out there. Please keep making music, and much love to you all.